Okay, folks, welcome back to another roundtable session. We have been very busy for the last couple of months. My apologies. We are actually busy working on phase two of the evolution project, but it's time to get these sessions back up and running. Today we have, in no particular order, Master of Tappy Tappy Roland Rivera and Master Rich Parsons. Um, Roland has been with us before. Richard hasn't, so I'm going to ask Master Rich if he would share a little bit about his background with us first. Both of these guys are well versed in not only Arnis under Remy Presas, but also in Balintawak. So I thought, given the topic that we're going to get into, that these guys were by far the best to start this discussion on Tappy Tappy. So, Master Rich, talk to us a little bit.
Thank you, Brian. Um, Please, Rich. The I started back in '86 in Modern Arnis, and I started in '98 with Balintawak. Obviously, I trained locally in the Flint area, tested for black belt underneath Remy, and moved forward from there. I wasn't interested in a lot of rank, no disrespect to those who were, because that's part of each individual's journey. Um, and then in '98, I also picked up some training with Manung Ted Boat, who was also within an hour of me. And so I could drive and take privates up weekly with him. And it was another learning experience starting at zero and coming up to the base. So I've worked as an engineer for my professional to make income. I teach because it's a passion. And I did have some experiences earlier in my life, both as bouncing and security and private security, and occasionally filling in the '90s afterwards when I was working as an engineer for other people who needed just, hey, I need some help running a security for this event or whatever. And so I'm familiar with some things, but I'm not up to date with everything at the current moment.
That's all right. Between the three of us, we got them all surrounded. We're going to do just fine. And Roland, you will go, how far back do you go with the Arnis?
Early '90s, started back then. Went through Master David Nong and Master Rick Ward, two on Rick Ward, that
Oh, yeah.
group through there. Um, so and then with some connections to Irwin as well, Irwin Carmichael. Yeah. So that was the link between um, GM GM Bobby and GM Presses together. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And when
But
did you start with GM Bobby?
oh, formally, I don't know. Maybe a dozen years ago, maybe so. I mean, I'd seen him on and off
Mhm.
throughout the years, but formally, probably not until like 2011, somewhere around there, something like that. But yeah, I'm a relative newcomer when it comes to Balintawak, so
There we
um,
go. Uh-huh.
yeah, there's a lot of experience there. I'm just scratching the surface, so we'll
Yeah.
see how
Well,
that all goes.
in that sense, we all are, but
Yeah,
yeah, I've had many conversations with both of you in depth over the years, and it's been a blessing to see that we're still doing this after all these years, and still lending a hand and helping one another wherever we can.
sure.
Yeah.
And it's painful to admit this, but we can't necessarily say, well, it's been X amount of years anymore. We're now in decades. I mean, Rich, you're rolling up on 40 next year, and I'm already there by 3 or 4. Yeah, I don't know where the time is going, gentlemen. My God. But anyway, what I thought we would do is tackle this whole tappy tappy thing. Um, it's vague. It has a couple different meanings. People have heard different things. I've posted on this many years ago to try and help clarify it, but I'm only one person. Um, so what I thought we would do is, or we're as with any roundtable session, we're going to see where it goes. They always go in a good place. But I thought we would start with the definitions or the translations or the meanings of them to see what the three of us can come up with. I can offer two, and one is very brief, which you are both acutely familiar with the professor. You had plenty of personal time with him. His definition was counter for counter.
Mhm.
That's what it means.
Mhm.
Full stop.
Mhm.
Um, when Roland and I were in the Philippines in '06, my God, Dan was there, Bram was there, Dieter was there, Guy and Yuval were there from Israel, as well was Bambit, Dule, Renee Thompson, Rodel Daguk, and unfortunately now the late Cristino Vasquez, which is Professor's cousin. I had an opportunity to sit with Cristino in his home across the street from the Presas household in Hinigran. And it was just before they brought me over to meet Roberto and Teresita Presas. And I had an ideal opportunity. And I said, GM Cristino, tell me whatever you can about Tappy Tappy. Where did it come from? How did it start? What's going on? And he said, okay. And his version or explanation was Tappy is Tagalog and it means tap or touch. According to him, Professor coined the phrase tappy tappy, which the Western mind would say, okay, well, that's two taps. Yes. However, the way he explained it to me was it was two incidents of contact, not necessarily me tapping the person twice, but two taps total. And the example he gave me was if I punch at him and he counters, there's a contact. When he brings it back and comes back at me with a counter and I counter that counter, there's the second incident of contact, which is just another way of saying counter for counter,
Mhm.
I think.
Mhm.
Makes good sense.
Mhm.
So although those definitions are very similar, they did kind of come from two different perspectives. One is really the translation, meaning tappy tappy, aka counter for counter. The other one was a little more of an explanation. So do either of you have any different versions or definitions or translations of tappy tappy? Roland?
No, I mean, I really work under the format that it is counter for counter, which makes it, yeah, that's a lot of reflection there.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see you. You look a little fuzzy, but I
that's
can
how I
differentiate
always look.
you two.
No, I look at it as I think that it was taught in packages, and that's how I have my students digest it in small packages.
Mhm.
But I still think of it as an overarching concept of counter for counter, which really encompasses everything we do. So, um, so that's how I look at Tappy Tappy.
Okay. How about you, Rich?
When I first saw it at a seminar, um,
When did you see it?
92, 93,
Okay, that makes sense.
um, he he started out with full Sinwali
Hmm.
and single stick, and then he said, "Now we're going to short it up to just the upper two, and with the strike, counter strike, block." And then he says, "Then we can work it back in." So he was using existing drills and existing techniques
Hmm.
in those drills,
Hmm.
and that's the way it was being taught at the time. Later conversations, can't tell you exact dates or year, but it was similar to what you said for counter for counter. He goes, yes, you move, they move, you move, they move, which is counter for counter, right?
Hmm.
Um, and he, one of the comments was he didn't want it to be static, but he knew everybody needed to have static for something to learn, if that makes sense. He wanted it to be variable, right?
Yeah.
So
Um, I had asked him at some point, um, keep in mind when he met Professor Lowry, my original instructor, in the very beginning of the 80s. They did some demos together, very fast. It was one of them was with live machetes. Professor Lee was not happy. He was very nervous that he was going to hurt the professor only because they didn't know what he was doing. And professor says, "Don't worry about it." But it was right to right single Sinawali. Next thing you know, it's a little bit of the back and forth. Next thing you know, he's got the blade in his left hand, inverted up inside Professor Lowry's armpit, holding Professor's right wrist. It was over. And the look on his face was priceless because we're all like, he wouldn't explain anything. That was just a demo. And I had
Right.
seen him do that a few times over the years, but he never told us about going into the left hand physically. And then somewhere, and I think you already said it, Rich, somewhere early 90s is when he started to release this thing. And of course, I asked him, Professor, you've always had the left hand, like left to right? Of course. So, me not being smart enough to know when to shut up, I said, well, why now? If you've had it the whole time, why are you doing it now? God is my witness. He said, I was bored. That's his answer. Okay. All right, next question. So it's not uncommon. I'm sure you've both seen this many times. He'll start right to right, go into the block check counter, which what we call right to right tappy tappy, sweep to the left hand, then go into the left to right tappy tappy, and then just bad things happen.
Yeah.
Disarm, dropped, stomped on, very similar chain of events at that point. And I remember having a conversation with him again, early 90s. I don't know when he said he released the left side. I'm assuming he meant the left to right portion because right around the same time he released the left side, he was also getting into the empty hand tappy tappy. It's the advanced, I don't even want to call it advanced trapping hands because that's not really its name. But if you were to do block check and counter empty handed, you're not doing trapping hands, so to speak. You're always responding with the right hand as if it has the stick in it. Um, he released those two things seemingly early 90s, and we were very confused because it wasn't the same as trapping hands, and that's what we were used to. So he shut it down and then re-released it at a later date, and I don't think it was years, but I think he changed the way he taught it, and that's when it started to stick and spread like wildfire. Because there was no left side being taught in the 80s, as far as I know. Did you see any in the 80s, Rich, being taught by him?
No, he did a demo at the 87 camp with
Mhm.
Rocky with his
Mhm.
left hand, but not being taught.
Mhm.
Um,
I think the closest thing we had back then was the right to right semi freestyle sparring, which was single Sinawali, the rolling puños.
Yep.
And yeah, Fancy did an overhead one, pass it right back to the roll. And then you kind of heavy handed check each other away, step off, and go back to single Sinawali.
And I do remember we would do left on left, but not left on right. And I'm
And
not sure if that was just something that we did for our category completion, training both sides. Um, but he never had a problem when he was in the Flint testing us for that. Um, I even put left-handed stick techniques into my black belt stick form. They wanted us to create a form, so we did. And I worked on it from like blue belt all the way on up, changing it, modifying it, fine
yeah,
tuning it. But it was you start out right, switch to your left, come back to your right, and he thought it was very nice. He actually clapped and was very happy about it because it showed the flow and it showed how you can move from the right hand to the left hand and still execute the techniques in the motion, right? You didn't have to stop and you know restart.
Mhm.
So
Awesome. Was the left to left a mirror version of right to right?
yes, it was peer beer version.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Good. Yeah. I don't know what specific difficulties he mentioned or encountered, but he did say that he says, I tried to teach, but they cannot do, so I stopped teaching. And then I think he changed his approach, but I never got the details. And it really didn't matter. But once that started being taught, it was obviously very popular because it was a very big change to the curriculum. Because as you guys both know, um, especially in the 80s, it was all Sinawali, it was all 12 basic strikes, disarms, the six count, the flow drill,
Right.
drilling,
Mhm.
drilling,
Yeah.
drilling, 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 you know?
Right.
Um, then this left thing comes in and all the different locks and eventually the traps. And that was just a huge change for us. And I remember being extremely frustrated trying to figure out how the hell is he flowing while doing all these locks,
Mhm.
transitioning through them and past them, and then kept going. I got some lumps on my head, and there's not enough lighting in here to show you, but you take a close look at the coconut, and there's some permanent lumps in there because many a sheetrock I banged into, and it took 30 years. I'm like, okay, all right, now this is starting to fit together. But all right. Um, can you guys help, especially because of your both of your backgrounds in Balintawak? Um, I had asked Bob Sullen years ago, who is very similar to you guys, um, advanced under professor himself, as well as GM Bobby. Obviously, Bob Sullen is one of Bobby's FQIs. He's been with Bobby now, GM Bobby, 25, 27 years. I asked him many years ago, what's the difference between GM Bobby's Balintawak and Tappy Tappy, meaning Remy Presas? And interesting answer. He said, Professor took the Balintawak he learned and blew air into it, expanded the range so that he could fit everything else in there, the locks, the baits. Now, I'm still not really familiar with Balintawak, but it made good sense because, Roland, do you remember when we were training in that brand new basketball gymnasium in the Philippines? It was either in Cavite or Amadeo when
Amadeo in Amadeo.
Bobby Tapamina showed up.
Yeah.
It's my first time seeing Balintawak, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? And the first thing I said to myself was, while I'm watching Dan get thumped, which was kind of cool, he offered to be Bobby Zuki. I'm like, that's the Tappy Tappy. Even though it was Bobby's version, which obviously 20-inch tapered sticks, much closer range.
Hmm.
I'm like, oh my God. So that puzzle has been spinning in the back of my brain ever since. And I'm slowly filling in the blanks. Can you guys clarify or add any insight into the connection between Tappy Tappy and Balintawak? And it doesn't matter who you're learning under. Um, there's a distinct relationship there. Had you spoken to Professor about Tappy Tappy as it applied to his early years of Balintawak training? Or did you come across anything either with G and Bobby or Manong Ted that helps us fill in these blanks?
Yeah,
Um,
he so as Nung Ted could only accept a certain number of students given his current student workload and working full time as an engineer as well. Some others started before I did, and I tracked him down to a seminar at Jay Spiro's and went to see him, and I asked him some questions, obviously as I always did, and he says, "Yes, the Blintalk is where I want to take this." And I said, "Exactly?" And he said, "No, but the um, replay, as he described it, and in Manung Ted Buat's description, it's the Curatus, it's the mixing bowl. So prior to the mixing bowl, everything is, being fed or scheduled. And even in the mixing bowl, you have somebody leading someone else. But depending upon how they react, right, you then counter yours. And if you're late, you do the late block. And if you're early, the other person does their late block, right? So there are those variations about how the mixing bowl putting things together and being free form. And I think that's what he was looking for, was to get people out there and moving in a more random environment, not just doing the 6 count or sombrata, as some called it, or any of the other single Sinwali or our semi-sparring drill from the 80s, right? But it was more of a let's get people moving, let's keep them aware so they're not doing the eyes rolling at the ceiling or looking over in the side. They're paying attention to what their opponents are doing, right? Because it's not just pure muscle memory. They also have to be aware of what else is going on and to be able to respond. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the ultimate kind of goal of any of these methodologies, so to speak, whether it's groupings or ungrouped or tapi sets and things of that sort. I think that um, the trap is thinking that the sets are the art or that the group is the art, whereas the reality is it's the breaking of the group, it's the breaking of the set and moving to something random is where you really want to be able to go, where you are, like Rich is saying, paying attention to your partner, whether it's physically looking or is it just feeling, and that type of thing is what the repetition builds, right? The repetition may be that it's putting you in the proper place for the most common strike, but it's also preparing you to accept any strike. And I think that that's where people need to really jump off and explore, right? Break the pattern, break the group, break the set. And if you think that, you know, whatever you call left hand number one, if you break that parry back fist into something else, then that's really the art, not so
yeah,
much the rote memorization of sets.
and you could see that with Revy's other drills, because first you learn 6 count, then you learn 10 count, and then you
Mhm.
learn where only one side did the extra thrust strike, so there was the block and the counter back to get you back into the system. So therefore, you had to pay attention on whether or not they were thrusting or not, right?
Right.
Um, and then when you did your break in, break out, right?
Hmm.
Do you enter in on the right? Do you enter in the left? You have to pay attention to make sure you pass that initial punyo strike, or whether it was a sweep strike or a block check punyo, right? Um, and then when you're exiting, you had to pay attention as well
Hmm.
to avoid getting hit when they were leaving.
That's right.
Um, so he worked a lot of ways to try to get that out there. And a lot of people saw it, but even more people didn't see it, as you were saying.
Right.
Yes, very true.
They concentrated, as Brian said, the Western mindset of, hey, I got to check this box. I got to learn this drill. And then
Right.
I'm going to do the drill as fast as possible. Therefore,
Right.
since I'm the fastest person on the floor, I'm the best at it. Right.
Right. Right.
And that may not be the case, because as soon as somebody breaks the pattern, um, one of the things I like doing when I teach my yellow belts in the Mount Arnis ranking is they know single Sinwali, right? So then I come at them totally asynchronous, but still in single Sinwali. Left
Hmm.
hand, right hand, high, low, out of phase, two sticks, cross sticks. Everybody in the audience is like, oh my gosh, this guy is going crazy because you're jumping around, dancing and swinging your sticks, and this guy is just standing there doing singles and walling and getting the pattern and not getting hit, right? Well, it shows those watching that their student can be husband, child, whatever, wife, they've learned, right? And it also gives them a little bit of pride, the student, because they're like, you've worked with them, but now they see other people are good with it. But it also then I go back and reference that and say, look, I was able to keep you in the pattern because I knew what the pattern was. And I could come at you with any strike from almost anywhere,
Mhm.
two at once, one at once. But I just needed to make sure that I placed it where your stick would be.
Mhm.
And so therefore, once I knew the pattern, I could be outside of the traditional pattern.
Right.
Um, Ernesto's X and Wally is another good one for that, where you can go high or low when you're crossing over. So they both had some good ideas along the way. I think the Tappy Tappy was the one that really stuck and moved with a lot of people, though, in the modern Arnis realm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even, the interesting thing is even the Seven Masters, more than half of them started in the 90s, around the time that Tappy Tappy was coming out into the open. Um, Randy and Gabi and I were all back in the 80s, the first half of the 80s. So we had all those years of drilling,
Yep.
but the remaining four came in somewhere in the beginning of the 90s, and the Tappy Tappy had already started being released. Um, and what a breath of fresh air it was. Not that we were bored, but I can remember constantly, and I'm sure the both of you experienced this too. Professor would take you off to the side, or if you picked them up at the airport or dropped them off, or whatever, and you got one on one, and it was like, they said, "What was that like?" I said it was like going up to a big hornet's nest and whacking it with a stick. That's what it was like. You didn't know
Somebody
when
walking
or
up to the
how.
fire
You
hose
knew
and
you were
said,
going to
hey,
get
can you
hit.
turn that on?
But you're going to get locked, dropped, disarmed. He goes to his left, and you're like, "What the hell? How did that just happen?" Man,
Learn how to levitate.
yeah, unless you're Remo Williams, man, you got some problems. But you just didn't know, and you make a good point, Rich. Yeah, you really had to pay attention. Um,
Yeah,
he kept us on the seat, the edge of the seat that whole time. And there was, I think, the last seminar he did with me, meaning when I brought him into Connecticut, it was in Wallingford, and we had been there a few times, but I think that was the last time that I had brought him in with my training partner, Tony Silverio. I think he came to Connecticut one more time before he eventually went to Europe and was diagnosed. But when he was here, I shouldn't even admit this because somebody's going to tell him, and he's going to hit me when I see him someday. I hit a camera. Um, it was all black belts, maybe 15 of us. And he went around the room and just thumped each one of us for maybe 30 seconds each. One on one, right to right, switched over, went left on right. And this is so long ago. This was with a high 8 camera. That's how far back we're going. Um, and at some point, I don't have the footage anymore. But when I reviewed it,
that's what
the
he's going to hit you for.
oh no, yeah, no my luck. St. Peter will be on break if I'm blessed to go upward. And who's going to be waiting with a stick? The man. But I looked at what he did with each person, and it wasn't that much different. He slightly changed the order, but he went after each person, and he was just playing. He was just in his glory because there was only about 20 of us. It was a type of sort of kind of a black belt only get together. And it really made me realize just how diverse his toolbox was, and yet at the same time, how simple it was. He didn't do anything incredibly different with any one individual, but he literally just he had some playtime with us, and it lasted maybe 10 minutes total. But very, very interesting, and you just never knew what was next. Right hand, left hand locks. transition back, um, and just be done with you. Like, all right, I'm bored. Next guy.
There you go.
No, you're basically dispensable. Go. So, I'd love to have a conversation, as I know we all would at this point. Why'd you do it this way? What were you thinking? But that's on us to kind of figure out and obviously carry forward, which all of us are doing along with our peers.
One
But
of the things that reminded me of is when people would train at with GM Pecan at behind the watch shop, or if there were multiple peoples, he'd bring you up and you'd work. And if you miss the same point twice, or if you did really bad on something and he's already showed it to you, he'd say, okay, you're done, and just push you off and grab someone else. And so he was looking to get the reps in with the people. And if you hadn't done your homework, he moved you off. But I don't think that was the case with Remy. I think the case there is he had limited time and he needed to do it. But he said, okay, I've got my reps in with you. Let's move on. I got my reps in with the next one. Let's move on. And then that way, everybody got to feel it. And the next time you feel it, it's even easier to see,
Mhm.
or easier to feel if you when it's connected.
Yep. It almost became a cat and mouse game because, getting into the mid 90s, into the later 90s, obviously as time went on, there were more and more people getting the hang of it slowly. And it didn't matter who was there. The three of us could have endured this. If he grabs Rich and he's pushing you, we're all, the other high ranking guys or the higher advanced guys would be looking like, because you can't possibly learn when he's got you in his clutches. But when he's putting on one of you, good for me, but he caught on and he started turning his back and giving us his back as we're watching. It's like, dude, really? Come on now. But I think in one way we were all Ukis, just helping him further his own
Sure.
prowess, And yeah, we learned along the way. My God, he gave us so much,
Sure.
but constant forward pressure. And one of the stories I remember when he passed was, I don't know who it was. Maybe you guys might know if you've probably heard the story. There was an Olympic trampoline in the gym, and professor was pushing on this guy, backed him right up to the edge of the trampoline, which is probably waist to chest height for an average adult male. Professor pushed him up against it, doing the tappy tappy, kept the pressure on, pushed him all the way down the length, rounded the corner, keeping the pressure on, kept him up against the rail around the corner, and then stopped and just walked away. And the guy was just like in awe. He goes, that was scary and amazing at the same time.
Yeah, that's similar to when he would train David and I over in Raleigh.
Mhm.
And I'd set a camera up and we'd be in frame and he'd start driving you and he would drive me all the way around the whole gym. So all you'd hear is the sticks, no video. And then all of
Fainter,
a sudden,
fainter,
a couple
louder,
minutes
louder.
later, I'd come back around and so yeah, it was something to get driven around like that.
Yeah, he wanted to get his steps in.
Yeah, sure. For sure.
Do do you guys have I'll teach in essence the right to right tappy tappy block check counter. But I will also do it empty-handed, and I will also do it with training knives just to kind of change the range and mix it up a little bit.
Sure.
That's all right to right. But then the left to right, I maintain pretty much just stick on stick, one on one. Do you guys have different drills that you've innovated with in essence, the core of the tappy tappy in terms of block check counter?
Well, and we try, so sometimes we don't have time, so we end up with the traditional things, but we try to make sure that every drill, every aspect is done with as many different methods as we can, whether it's single stick, double stick, sword and dagger, single dagger, double dagger, or staff, and empty hand. And we try to run through those and then we mismatch the weapons if we can. So that way you can see the differences in understanding range,
Hmm.
understanding timing, and seeing where the different openings are.
Yeah,
Oh,
we have a similar ranges. We not hit all of them per belt, but by the time you're brown 2 or brown 3, we're trying to run you through as many of them at once for that test as you move forward, and then probably call out a few just for the black belt. But um, change the ranges, mix the ranges of the weapons, um, two sticks versus stick and dagger. So then the person with the dagger starts thinking about thrusting, and then the other person with two sticks realizes, oh, wait a second, I can thrust too. And then
Mhm.
um, yeah, and we do put it in. And sometimes when I'm working with people, I will switch to my left, and you're like, okay, all right, do the technique. They're like, it's not working. Okay, switch to the right. Hey, I'm able to get it to work. All right. Boom, boom, boom. The angles just aren't right. And you're like, well, you're not paying attention, but okay. And it says they're just looking at the angle of the stick, right? But whether I do a backhand 2 or an angle 1
same,
left-handed,
same, same.
thing,
It's,
but how my body reacts for how they want to move me is different.
That's
So
right.
then, so therefore, they're like, oh,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
forces the sensitivity and the awareness as well.
You can
And
almost
then,
hear,
with left versus right, we try to do left versus right and then right versus left. Same thing, but right dominant, not left dominant.
okay,
Right. Correct.
okay.
So each person takes a turn doing
Mhm.
countering each other, but not changing hands.
Right, right. You can almost, when you take somebody that you start to introduce them at whatever point in their training to the tappy tappy, you can almost hear the gears burning because when you tap that other side of the brain, I can still remember. Now, mind you, we'll just say hypothetically, he released the left in 92. It's just a generalized statement. I never wrote it down. Um, 12 years of almost 12 years of, or at least we'll just say over 10 years of right on right, all these years. All of a sudden the cane's in his left and it's not symmetrical anymore.
Mhm.
And he's tasking that other side of your brain to respond. And it's like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And he wasn't big on words. We all know that English wasn't his first language. And he taught more with the stick in the hand than the voice. But even to this day, when I get ready to introduce somebody, I'll do a few minutes and then I'll say, okay, that's it. We'll do this again for a few minutes for 2 or 3 times and slowly get them into it, particularly when we go to the left side, because I can see the look in the face.
Mhm.
The elevator ain't going all the way to the top and only half the lights are on. I mean, it's funny from where we're standing, but what a challenge it is, that left brain, right brain thing. And believe it or not, I think Roland, you may have met my friend Craig. Um, Literally a fully blown principal psychiatrist.
Mhm.
He said, you cannot imagine how healthy the left to right tappy tappy is for your mental health, your brain, your physical brain, because you're challenging it in such a way where it's not symmetrical. He said, this is exactly the type of exercise people should be able to use to help defer or stave off the real bad stuff, the dementias and the Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And I'm like, wait, whoa, 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 ho, ho, ho. You're saying what you're saying is this stuff that important? We got to start charging more money.
Yeah, but that's balanced out by all the times you get hit in the head. So
That's what I was going to
That's
say.
irreparable. Yeah. Yeah. No, we're past that, right?
that's right.
I don't
That's
know if my
right.
eye twitch is from Professor Prasos or corrections, but maybe a little bit of both. But literally, I introduced him to it, and he's an old school Goju-Ryu guy from 30 years ago. Studied abroad in Japan for a full year when he lived there, and just a brilliant mind. And he literally said, "This is actually a huge benefit for your mental health,
Mhm.
um, because you're challenging the quote unquote the other side." It's like, wow. I never would have known. So yes, very interesting. And I've had good luck in doing it in short bursts until they get over the initial, what the heck is this? But what an amazing concept, because if you rewind to be it 86 or 88 or 90, whenever we all started, the six count. Well, that's tappy tappy.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm in a long-standing playful feud with Dan Anderson. His six count was kind of a couple of 12s on angles instead of, like, I was given three and four, or actually one and two, making each other duck underneath. No, I apologize. I'm switching with the flow drill.
Hmm.
Um, his flow drill were kind of angular 12s, as to where I
Yeah.
was given ones and twos.
Right.
Had to duck. His
Right.
professor would swing for here,
Yeah.
not, and he goes, no, 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 no. There were angular 12 or angular ones and twos, and then at 12, I said, that's not possible.
Yeah.
I said, wrong. What do you mean I'm wrong? I said, well, I went to his house like it was yesterday in Hinnigan, and the floorboards were at eye level, and then there was a joist, a floor joist. So if you're under the house training, which is where they train, there's no way they're throwing 12s, Dan. He goes, you know what? I'm done with you. But
No, they weren't throwing 12s. And yeah, we did the same thing with the dodging and having to change your level to be able to, or take it on the collarbone.
well, I'll tell you, here's the interesting thing. Dan's always up for a good debate. And I had the privilege of watching the ridiculous Tyson Jake Paul fight with him in the living room.
Yeah,
And I had more fun watching Dan react than actually watching that ridiculous fight. Um, although the female fight before that was one of the best matches I've ever seen in my life.
that was a good fight. Yeah.
Oh my God. But yeah, Dan, the animal, Super Dan came out watching the Tyson fight with him. But he said the reason, the footwork, he goes, but my footwork in the flow drill is different than yours because Professor made them take a sidestep, a lateral move, a large one, to avoid the incoming angular one or two. Instead of ducking down, Professor made them move off to the side, both ways. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. When did you have this drill? He figures it was really quick, 1980. And I'm figuring I had mine right away, 82. But here's the difference that we came up with. Professor spent how many years on the West Coast only
Right.
before he took to the air? So 5, 6, whatever years West Coast, just started coming out east and possibly figured the West had more experience. And did he change it from coast to coast? All I can tell you is that we got that drill taught to us differently, and that upper half was taught for different reasons. We were ducking and avoiding with the umbrella, but the West Coast was being the emphasis was on the lateral, going back and forth to avoid that downward angle. Very interesting. And this is one of the reasons that sparked my wanting to start with Tappy Tappy and the evolution project, because if he taught that basic drill differently in the early 80s, how much more did he teach differently up until 2000 over thousands of people? Well, there's no telling.
Mhm.
So by starting the phase two, well, phase one is written, phase two is the video to support phase one. By showing what he taught us, the way he taught us, when we get to phase three, I'm hoping you'll both be available. Whatever the topic is going to be, let's say it's going to be tappy tappy. Well, take however long you want, send in a video, both of you, and it goes in along with everyone else's contribution to the tappy tappy. So they'll have a baseline of what Professor taught us from phase two, and then we show the innovations and the differences in phase three. Um, I do want to speak with everyone at some point about not putting the left to right on video. I think they should come to each of us at the round table or whomever to get the left to right, not just get it on a video. You know what, guys, we're giving you everything, but we're going to hold back that one special snack. You got to convince one of the OGs that you're worthy of it. But that's just going to be a suggestion. I'm nobody special. But
Yeah, we did also get the step um, to transition out, but those who started in Flint also started in like 76 with one of the first seminars that he did in Chicago.
okay.
Um,
So they got the
but
angular
yeah,
lateral. Okay.
right. And you had to step lateral. And it came out because I was working at a Dr. G seminar and he was doing two-handed da, and you were supposed to be blocking, step off to the right, step off to the left, you block
Hmm.
two hands on your weapon. Instinctively, I was single-handing the weapon and trapping their weapon down, and then coming back and striking through with two wet hands. And the Kempo guy, who was also a Dr. G guy, calls me out in front of Dr. G, and the host walks into his room office and closes the door because he didn't want to see me get beat up by Dr. G. And the guy comes over and goes, "All right, show me what you guys are doing." And so now I'm doing it even harder, right? So before I was driving through his blocks, but now I'm like crushing him and hitting him in the collarbone. And he just pushes me off to the side. He goes, "You need to block," to the other guy. He goes, "He is crushing you. You need to." I was like, okay, got through that. That night, we're out to dinner. Wasn't trying to get close to him or anything. He sneaks up on me, checks my elbow, and we've all had that done by Remy and a few others. And I'm turning, waiting for the sucker punch, right? And he's sitting there going, same thing Remy did to me, shaking his finger, and he goes, "You are very strong. You are going to hurt someone. You must learn sensitivity." And then I'm thinking for the rest of the seminar, wow, this guy who's known for, ripping people apart calls me the animal. I'm like, I'm the bad guy. So yeah, but yeah,
It's
I realized I'd learned it then and other times, but it just came out instinctively when the two hand strike was coming down. It's like, no, I don't want to be underneath it, right?
Yeah.
I want to be off to the side, and so I would deflect it and make sure I pass it and make sure it misses me, and so because I
even
wasn't going to hit, I think Dr. G was okay with it. But if I would have missed any of them, I think I would have gotten.
I didn't meet him until maybe 2012.
Okay.
He was a little bit older by then, but I had heard of him for many, many, many years prior to. And he was Bando, right? The
Yeah.
Yeah. Bando. Yeah. Bando. Yeah.
yeah. Um, even the whole counter it's so all encompassing the counter translation. Um, we would do the umbrella block and then the wing block above if you keep throwing 12s at me.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
And yet I forget who it was. Might have been Gabi. She said, "Oh, we just call that opposing figure eights. So if we're
Yes.
both figure eights, it's just opposite."
Mhm.
Right. One's coming down, and the other
Yeah.
ones are coming up. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? Again, that took 25 years to make that connection. And it's all good, but this is such a diverse concept and it touches so many different pieces. And yet, I think Roland, you touched on it a little earlier. They get kind of target lock on the fact that it is a drill. We can actually say this is exactly what tappy tappy is, but again, 6 count, 10 count, trapping hands. It's all counter for counter.
Yeah. Anytime, single Sinawali, that's all counter for counter, right? So
Yeah.
um, that's when it becomes a concept and less a drill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, at some point, I'm going to start figuring out with Mark how to take questions, either probably through the main website, modernarnisroundtable.com, um, in case there's something that we didn't mention during one of these discussions, because I want to try and answer as many questions as possible. But I was hoping to at least have an in-depth conversation, see where it went. Let me ask you this, if somebody came to you, whether they're brand new or maybe they say they have 10 years in FMA in general, not necessarily just Balintawak or modern Arnis. and they asked you to explain Tappy Tappy, and you had the opportunity to explain it to them, how would you break it down for them, Roland?
I think that I would start out with the idea that it is a counter for counter.
Mhm.
Um, but in order to, I would teach it more, and I do teach it more as a platform to teach specific attributes. I don't necessarily look for specific techniques, at least at this point. I look more for teaching them footwork in and out, timing, ranging, things like that. I would say that that is the biggest benefit of doing toppy toppy. Say if you want to break it down into those specific sets, um, it's those attributes that you learn that become a jumping off point for everything else that we will teach. Um, and sometimes people jump from that, and some people jump to that, so they do everything else and then they see Toppy Toppy and they say, oh, this is just another drill. Um, but really, the longer you're in it, the more you understand that it's everything you've done from the time you bowed in to the time you bow out is Toppy Toppy, right? It's just for a beginner, it's hard to digest the whole art in one word or one phrase.
Very true.
So,
True. I find myself changing, not necessarily changing the definition, but changing my approach on how best to explain it, or maybe I should say expose it to them, because you guys been at this just as long. They need to be in it for years before they really start to appreciate and understand how vast this thing is. Uh, and it's not unlike cooking in the kitchen with little fat grandma.
mhm.
Uh, she didn't necessarily ask you to come ask questions. She said she'd teach you. Doesn't mean
Mhm.
you get to talk.
Yeah.
Sit down and
Yeah.
shut up or stay out of the way, or do what I tell you and don't ask no questions.
Yeah.
When I approach the teaching aspect of it, I tell them, here's your framework, here's your initial box.
Yeah.
But the end goal is to step out of the box. When you get lost, you come back to the box.
Yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
And
Yes.
then that gives you a place to experiment with. But it takes the right type of student to get by that, because they're usually like, okay, what do I need for the next belt? What do I need for the next? So if you are teaching for that mindset, which is fine because that's how many of the schools stay open and pay the bills, right?
Mhm.
You have a curriculum in front of them, they cover the curriculum and it works fine. But if you're working with just a handful of students, then you can concentrate on concepts with them a little bit more and not necessarily chase that and then hand them a belt. Then that gives you the opportunity to address it in a slightly different
Mhm.
teaching methodology. Um, Not necessarily better, just different.
Different.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I find myself quite often, especially in the last few years, saying, guys, almost none of this is right or wrong. It's just a matter of it's being done differently, regardless of why. And instead of getting frustrated between the differences, embrace the differences because there might be value in both. But this whole right or wrong thing,
Right.
no, that's not what it is. How many
Well,
times did Professor eyeball his opponent when he was initially going around on the West Coast trying to get into these different schools? And it'd sit there and watch the head instructor for a few minutes before he got up on his feet and went on and basically challenged him. We'll call it a demo, right? But he got to watch him for 30 minutes. He already got him figured out. He's got him pegged, you know? So and as if you guys think back to all the camps and seminars that we've collectively attended, racing back to your room to write notes or getting that big camera on your shoulder, and you stuff it in your room so he didn't see it to try and record this stuff. Or a couple of the guys were talking into the tape recorders. Um, so much information coming in, but eventually the compounding exposure and it finally started to stick. Um, but is there a
Yeah.
belt sheet or a curriculum that could expedite this? I don't think so. You just got to get in, trust the instructor, keep at it, and eventually that what do you call the osmosis will eventually get you there. But
Right.
as you know, long time,
Yeah.
long time.
2 points. One example that I had was in the 87 camp, people were teaching the forms, empty end forms differently. And some of the stick forms were even taught differently. Some
Yep.
people stepped backwards for
That's
form
crazy.
3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I'm like, okay, I went over to, I call him Remy, but professor, and said, hey, excuse me, sir, which one do I learn?
Boy.
Which one do you want me to learn? And he looked at me and he says, learn them all. And I had a confused look on my face. He said, all right, put your back to the wall. Chalkboard behind me, sticking in my kidneys, with the railing for the chalk. And he goes, all right, can you step backwards? No. Okay. So now you have to do it stepping forward now or stepping to the right. Put me in the corner. Now, can you step to the right? No. Do the form. And you're like, okay, all right. So these variations were good to know.
Mhm.
But back to, mindset of, hey, I need to have a box to learn out of.
Right.
What's the box? And then from there. So it was interesting how things melded over time to what became the standard for them. And that was good because I appreciated when the forms were much more standard. And then you watched them on the videos and you watch the variations of those who demonstrated, but when you watched Remy do them, you were like, that's what I need to move. There's the step. There's the hand placement. There's the, so yeah.
I still say he created those anyos for his own personal entertainment. How many times did it almost come to blows at all these camps on Saturday nights after dinner? And he's just sitting up in the bleachers, just watching the chaos.
Yeah.
I'm not downplaying anything here, but I'm like, what? I think this dude just did this on purpose. Which one is right? Yes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? Oh God. But if you look back, whenever he got somebody in his hands that was decent, pretty good, or advanced, call it whatever you want, it was that right to right single Sinawali, typically, into the right to right tappy tappy, into the left to right single Sinawali, and then into the left to right tappy tappy. That was almost his box where he kept grounding you to not lose you and get you back to that. Not that it was safe, but he kept bringing you back to that template and just kept shooting off from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The locks and then the takedowns. And eventually, obviously, I think Richie said it earlier. He's like, yeah, I'm done with you. And just, you know, wipe you away and get on to the next body. But yeah, that area of familiarity, or he would stop and hold your cane down low to get you to break away and throw that
Yep.
first low strike to resume the single Sinawali. Um, but it's fascinating in the way he went about it. But this thing became so complex and all ever widening and spreading. Um, what I'm trying to help myself understand is we were fortunate to have the professor first person for many, many years. There are so many people out there now that are around us. The majority of them never met him. And we can't continue teaching this art the same way that the professor did because people followed him. They followed the person, just like with G and Bobby. It's an amazing art, but they're really hooked on him and his dynamics, on his energy and his thunder, much like with the professor. But we probably have to go about it differently because that focal point, that GM Bobby or that GM Remy are not with us. GM Bobby is, of course. Um, but how do we are we thinking about how to move this thing forward and not just teaching it, but keeping this thing going without the main figure? Um, I think I made a few too many assumptions, and I slowly started to realize since COVID, I'm like, hey, we really got to retool this thing. It was easy for us just to sign up, go to a camp and get beat up and go home, drink out of a straw for a couple of days, you know, and do it all over again. But they don't have him. And we're blessed that there's so many of us, we're still in the double digits in terms of the what I call the OGs. But our level of awareness of how it was given to us versus how we have to regurgitate it and put it back out there, um, probably going to be a little different than how we received it,
Mhm.
you know? All good problems to have.
Mhm.
But I thought we would start with talking about the Tappy Tappy, how we got it, not so much when, but received it, and our exposure to it. And then how are we putting it out there? And hopefully they'll benefit, and hopefully this will offer a little bit of clarity. Um, so, anything else about the Tappy Tappy that we haven't talked about that you think might be beneficial to a viewer? And keep in mind, we're looking at the younger generation and the younger black belts or the newer black belts that will eventually take this over for us. Hopefully, no time soon because we're still enjoying ourselves. But is there any other aspect of this you think that we haven't covered that might be helpful?
No, I think it's a good entry point, and I think that that's. I mean, you guys have both touched on it. I think that it's that creating a familiarity, a place that you're comfortable exploring from, and I think that that's the biggest benefit of what we do. I mean, in this drill or concept or however you want to call it, it's that jumping off point where we can explore. And then, like Rich said, if you get a little scared, you come back, and then you go back out again, and then you come back, and you'll find that's to me that's the best way my students learn is I just give them the base and I let them run with it.
How about you, Rich?
Yeah, sometimes you have to make mistakes.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and as Brian stated, that osmosis effect, and some people would keep asking like the question why, and I go, all right, 1 plus 1 is what? And they go 2. And I go, why? And they look at you, well, because it is. And you're like, okay, there's 3 proofs. One's 37 pages, one's a whole lot longer, and one's a pictogram that you could draw on the chalkboard or whiteboard. I'll take any 3. Go. And they're like, I go, so you just accept it that 1 plus 1 is 2, and then you moved on and learned other mathematics. Yes. Okay. Can you accept this and move on and learn other techniques and concepts? And then we can come back around once you have more of a better understanding. And then we can have a better dialogue. And many come back later and they go, yeah, I didn't get it then. Later, they're like, yeah, it made sense, right? So,
I've tried many different approaches over the years, and one of them was when it came up, and somebody was hungry to understand. I said, "Yeah, you're not ready for that understanding yet." I said, "We're going to use your sense of touch, and we're going to teach. You're going to learn this in the physical sense, which is basically the way we learned it. But eventually, the brain will catch up." But I said, "All that's going to happen for now. If your brain gets involved, it's just going to screw things up." So again, trust the instructor. Hopefully, you got a good one, and just consistent exposure. And it's taken a while, but I've got a fairly good handle on my regular attendees, students that come to the house. They're filing in now. We got a class starting in a minute or two.
Okay.
But just keep going at it, and eventually it keeps sticking. I try to explain it as almost like taking a basketball, wetting it, and rolling it down the beach. It's going to stick to the surface quick, but it isn't going to stay very long because it's going to dry out and fall off.
yeah.
But I said, trust me, this stuff will stick over time. And I had one student show up after taking off 20 years to raise 5 kids, and they now have 9 grandchildren. She does.
Wow.
Yeah. And she goes, oh my God, I'm so rusty. I said, come here. And went to many a mass camp with me. Wonderful, wonderful person. And within 10 minutes of nice and slow, we did both
Mhm.
set of wallies, right to right to right, tappy tappy, and a short number of the left to right. Nice and easy. And I wasn't guiding her. I just said, just follow, just like you used to. She got done and she's like, what the hell was that? I said, it's in the muscles. I said, here's the problem. Your brain's in the way. I said, how many thousands of reps with the professor? How many times, you know, how many decades we spent tapping under this guy's wrath? So, all good, all good. But guys, thank you so much. We're just over the hour, which is my sweet spot for the roundtable sessions. If anything else comes up, I think this was very thorough. And again, I can't thank you both enough for helping me get this topic started. Um, but at some point we will finish phase two, and I'm going to been reaching out to both of you for phase three. And the goal there is to name a topic and just have however many, say there's 10 or 15 of us, send in your contributions, and it will be condensed, not edited, but put into one video. And if the topic is tappy tappy, it could be an hour long. But that will be in contrast to the baseline that they saw in phase two. So they'll get to see what professor taught versus where we went with this stuff and what we've learned over the years, because unfortunately it's closing in on 24 years without them, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that difference between phase two and phase three. But we're getting there. We're going to try and wrap up phase two in the next couple of months, and then start chasing some folks for some video footage for phase three. And I don't know what the set order of the topics will be. Maybe we'll just start at the top of the curriculum page in phase one and just, maybe lump a few of them together. But maybe we'll just do it that way. I don't know. We'll see. You know? So we'll start to wrap this up. Guys, thank you so much. I do have to get going for class. When we conclude the recording, please feel free to stay on. I teach class every Wednesday here at the house, and then again on Sundays. Privates in between. But I don't know. You get snow your way, Roland?
Yeah, we got a little bit. Um, we got about an inch and a half here, which shut down North Carolina, that kind
Oh,
of thing. So, but it was a weird one because it was more snow on the coast than it was in the mountains. So it
and
was reverse what it's usually.
and well south of you, Pensacola,
Oh,
Florida, got
gosh, yeah.
8 inches. They don't know what to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's a dusting for Rich,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
her
Well, I
area
mean,
of
I
the
only
North.
got
But
inch and a half and then a couple inches the next day or whatever, but it was a little bit at a time. So I was able to keep everything shoveled.
Mhm.
But um, yeah, it was a good time.
yeah,
Yeah. The snow here was so dry this time. Usually we get a lot of that southern moisture that comes up with it,
Yep.
yeah.
but we were right on the tail of it. So I just used a blower. I just blew my driveway like it was leaves. So
There's no rules.
this wasn't too bad.
Um, so folks, I hope you enjoyed this session. I got to get going to teach class, but this will go up probably on Sunday near the end of the month, both on YouTube, and we're almost ready to start linking the videos on modernundiesroundtable.com. But folks, if you have any more questions about the Tappy Tappy, if there's something we missed, let us know. I think we've covered quite a bit, and I can't think of anything that we missed. But the YouTube channel is, I think it's Modern Arnis Roundtable, as is the new website. And the purpose of the new website is to kind of have a one focal point for everyone, be it the YouTube videos or the Evolution Project, the Legacy Camp flyers. And while I'm thinking of it, any seminars that you guys are coming up with, please do not hesitate to send in a digital flyer. That will also go on modernandnieceroundtable.com. There'll be a single page dedicated to upcoming events so that people aren't chasing everybody on Facebook and who's this and who's that. I've even with some of our brothers and sisters from Pikiti Tertia, Giambabi, of course, family all the way through. That events page on the new website, I'm hoping not just to unify modern Arnis, but all the FMAs, the Balintawak, the Pikiti Tertia, you know. I'm hoping it'll be a kind of a community board for any and all future events. So, all right.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Oh, stay safe
Good
and
seeing you.
same here. We'll talk soon, Roland. I'll see you in about 2.5 weeks.
Yes,
Hopefully in warmer places.
that's right. Hopefully I can bust through the snow.